Hello everyone, this is Michael, and we are listening to the band Yes, and today we are going to do part one of a two-part deep dive into the band's very large studio catalog. The band has 21 studio albums, I believe. The debut came out in 1969, and their most recent release was in 2023, so this band has been an ongoing entity for 50 plus years. Today, we're going to look at part one, which is the band's studio output during the years 1969 to 1980, during which time they released 10 studio albums, 59 songs, 7 plus hours of music. Part two in our Yes series is from the albums from 1983 to 2023, which is an additional 11 studio albums containing 104 songs and 11 plus hours of music. Now, Yes, of course, is a legendary band with a somewhat torturous history in terms of the band members, who was in, who was out, and also their musical direction. So we have a number of notes to go through before we dive into the specifics of individual albums. I'm going to bring my notes up because I have so much to discuss here. Now, Yes is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They're a hugely successful band. They've sold over 30 million albums. They have packed arenas and stadiums from pretty much the beginning of their career until today. They are credited with some of the most influential, successful, and well-regarded progressive rock albums during their early 1970s peak. They have been a huge influence on bands since then in terms especially of virtuosic instrumental abilities and integrating that into rock music. They are known for, especially early, they really, the thing that I say about bands like Yes and Rush especially, all of them are just virtuosos on their instruments. Incredibly technically skilled players. But neither Rush nor Yes ever devolved into playing difficult musical passages just for the purposes of playing difficult musical passages. Their virtuoso skills were always used in service to the song. The song was the objective, and not playing your instrument as fast as you could. Something that I feel like a lot of modern progressive bands have failed to do. I feel like frequently with many modern bands, the objective is to show you how difficult you can, how you can play difficult parts and not an actual enjoyable song. So anyway, now, Yes took the virtuoso musicianship and combined it with great songcraft, vocal harmonies. Multiple guys could sing in the band, and they would do these great layered vocals. And they had a pop sensibility to everything they did, so that they could play songs that you could sing along with and that would ring in your head because it had a nice hook to it. And combining all that was really what I think made Yes unique and so successful initially. Now, like I say, the band has had a torturous history in terms of members. By my count, there have been more than 21 people who have been official members of Yes. And in my opinion, there are 8 that are core members. And if you want a really good Yes album, you need to have at least 3 of these 8. If it's not 3 of them, it's probably not a real Yes album, in my opinion. You really want to have at least 4 of these core members, and it's when you get 5 of them together that you really get the best Yes magic that they've been able to offer. So let's go through these core members, because it's important to know who's who in this thing. We have John Anderson on vocals. John Anderson is, of course, known for his very high-pitched, what I call chipmunk on helium vocals, and his really vague, oftentimes somewhat meaningless lyrics. He says that he doesn't write lyrics for meaning, but for how they feel. And that's fine until you've heard that over and over again. As we're going to see, I kind of get tired of it after a while. He's also one of the primary creative forces in the band in the early 70s peak period. So John Anderson is a key player. Chris Squire is your bass player from the band's debut album until his passing away in 2015. He appeared on every official Yes album during that period. He also contributed backing vocals, and Chris Squire is one of the very best rock bassists in all rock music history, up there with the likes of John Entwistle, John Paul Jones, and Geddy Lee. He's a core member. We have Steve Howe on guitar, an indisputable rock god, can play seemingly every type of guitar. Plays electric, plays slide guitar, plays acoustic, classical acoustic, and he can seemingly play in every single style imaginable. One of my absolute favorite rock guitarists with the ability to paint anywhere on the canvas. Just a really, really impressive dude. So Steve Howe on guitar, and then on drums we have two key guys, Bill Bruford and Alan White, both highly accomplished drummers. Bill Bruford in particular has had a long and distinguished career playing with a wide array of musicians in both the rock and jazz music worlds. But Alan White has actually played on more albums for Yes. I think he's played on 17, where Bruford has played on like 6 or 7. So those two on drums. And then on keyboards, we have had more turnover than on any other instrument. We've had, by my count, 7 different people have been official keyboard players for Yes. The two that are core members, in my opinion, are Rick Wakeman and Tony Kaye. Both have appeared on 7 or 8 albums each. Rick Wakeman in particular is known for his drama and flair and somewhat prickly personality, but he is just astounding on the keyboards, and he has this drama and flair to his keyboard playing that elevates him amongst keyboard players, in my opinion. And then finally, the last core member I have to mention is Trevor Rabin. While Trevor Rabin appears on only 4 Yes albums, he had a huge influence on the band. He was the primary creative force on all 4 of those albums. He sang lead vocals on most of the songs on those albums, and he contributed lead guitar on those 4 albums. More importantly, he was the person who creatively took the band from their progressive rock roots from the 70s and converted them into a 1980s pop rock band. And in doing so, he's responsible for the band's most commercially successful album, 90125, and their most commercially successful song, Owner of a Lonely Heart. So those are the 8 core members. There's, like I say, 13 other members, but most of them only appear on 1 or 2 or 3 albums at most. Finally, I got to say this about John Anderson. Whenever I do one of these long videos, I will listen to the band's entire catalog from beginning to end. I'll listen to it as a mix for a while, but then right before I get ready to make the video, I will listen from beginning to end. Well, the entire catalog in Yes is 20 plus hours of music, so that's a substantial effort. And it's listening to a lot of music. And John Anderson has a quality voice with a very high-pitched sound, but he doesn't have a lot of range. He sings in the same high-pitched range almost non-stop. And that just grew to be a bit tedious to me. I got tired of his vocals. And what I realized about vocalists, which now seems patently obvious to me and something that I should have realized before but I never had, is that a quality vocalist can elevate a mediocre song from mediocrity to something good. A lower quality vocalist cannot elevate a mediocre song into something good. And what I found, especially with the Yes catalog, when they have great songs, John Anderson's vocals are fine. When they have mediocre songs, John Anderson's vocals become a problem for me. I found it very difficult to listen to these kind of 3-star, borderline good bad songs. His vocals tended to really grate on me after a while. And when you combine that with the fact that most of his lyrics don't have any real meaning, and he's just singing about vibes, the lyrics after a while become kind of meaningless. And then if you combine that with a grating vocal tone, I really began to not like John Anderson's vocals by the time I was done with this. So keep that in mind as we go through the individual songs. So Yes were signed by Atlantic Records in 1969 after a audition at the Speakeasy Club in London for Atlantic Records owner Ahmet Ertegun, who was a legendary music producer and signed numerous bands, most notably Yes and Led Zeppelin. Signed both of them in 1969. Their first debut release was simply titled Yes, and like I say, it came out in 1969. I give it a rating of 68, which is close to a 70, which is very good for the most part, and it either fails to reach the highest highs or has some low lows. I'm just going to go through my notes. I will say this, that in listening to this music, these first two albums that Yes released, which sound a little different than most of their classic peak period, were the two albums that surprised me by how good they were. I hadn't listened to these albums from beginning to end in many, many years. And when I did, I was really impressed with how good they sounded from beginning to end. Especially the second album, but the first album too. And this album was not commercially successful, but it did get very positive reviews at the time. And it really does sound innovative. It's very interesting combination of really good instrumental musical chops and then these instinctive pop melodies. And then you combine them with these somewhat ambitious conceptual pieces. This is not 20-minute prog epics, but you get 6-7 minute songs that allow the band to stretch out instrumentally and do some very kind of proggy things, but it's kind of wrapped in this very 60s psychedelic pop sensibilities, and they pull it off. They really make it work quite well. We do have a couple covers here, one by the Byrds and one by the Beatles, but otherwise these are all original songs. I'm just going to go through the notes I have for each song individually. But Beyond and Before, this is pretty much standard psychedelic rock from the late 60s. It's about 5 minutes long, and there's nothing particularly remarkable about this song. I See You is the song that we listened to at the very beginning, and I love this song. This is the Byrds cover, and I have a rule about covers is that they either need to be better than the original or they need to be different from the original. I don't know the original in this case. I don't like the Byrds. I'm not a folk music fan, and whenever I've listened to the Byrds, I get bored really quickly. So I can't say if this is better or different than the original. What I know is that I like this version a lot. It's 7 minutes long, and it combines kind of standard 60s pop sensibilities, but like you got these jazzy guitar runs, you got an extended guitar solo with little backing other than these kind of low volume drums, and this gives the guitarist at the time, Tony Banks, an opportunity to kind of show his chops. Tony Banks, by the way, was a pretty accomplished guitarist who played guitar on the band's first two albums, but eventually got replaced by Steve Howe, and that had to be pretty tough because he was really quite good on the guitar, but Steve Howe is better. And then finally at the end you get this powerful full band instrumental section. Yesterday and Today. I don't know why these are numbered wrong. 1, 2, 5, 3. This happens. I do know why, but it's always annoying to me. Yesterday and Today is the third song, and this is a John Anderson ballad, and this one is dull and uninteresting, and that is going to be something that pops up quite a lot, is these clear John Anderson driven ballads are frequently not very satisfying, in my opinion. Looking around, we give it a 30. A 60, which is a 3 out of 5, and honestly this is more like a 3.5 stars out of 5. I pretty much, when I went back and listened to this, I liked this song. It's got this cool proggy sounding pop rock combination, and that ability to combine those musical chops with pop sensibilities, pop like melodies is really a good signature of what Yes was capable of doing. And in my opinion, in this case, that combo is kind of indicative of where the band would more successfully move into the future. Every Little Thing, of course, is a Beatles cover, and in my opinion, this is not just different from the Beatles version, it's also better than the Beatles version. The opening has nothing to do with the original Beatles song. It's a 2-minute instrumental section, and it's really prog rock at its kind of most raw, aggressive, and innovative during that late 60s, early 70s period. That 2-minute instrumental to this is Yes really kind of exploring that part of their sound. The rest of the song does sound more like a Beatles cover. It's good and competent, and they do have those great vocal harmonies, but it's not, to me, as compelling as that opening instrumental section. Sweetness is the first song that Chris Squire and John Anderson wrote together, and it has this great sweeping arrangement and these multi-layered vocals. Not a big fan of the hippy-dippy lyrics, but this is all in sort of a more 60s kind of groovy style, as opposed to the 70s kind of stoner rock style that they would embrace in a couple albums. And then finally we get Survival, which is a multi-sectional song. The first 90 seconds or so is again very proggy instrumental opener with time changes and jazz inflections. But it also swings, which is something Yes does a lot, where they're doing these jazzy parts or these proggy instrumental sections, and yet they're doing it in a way that makes you tap your toes, which prog music doesn't always do. Now, once it transitions into the main song, I don't think it's all that compelling, but overall, a very successful debut album. And while I only give 2 songs more than a 60, the overall vibe and sound of the album is really quite innovative and daring for its time period. And I could see how somebody listening to this album back then could embrace this band and think there's a lot of potential there, and they did eventually fulfill it. So after the first album did not have a lot of great commercial success, the band made their second album, and it was largely recorded in between times when they were doing shows. So it wasn't like they all just went into the studio for 2 weeks or 3 weeks and recorded the album. They did it in bits and pieces. They also made the decision to include extensive use of brass and string orchestra as a backing to the sound. This did not sit all that well with guitarist Peter Banks. He objected to kind of the direction the band was going in, even though he was quite accomplished on the guitar, and he ended up getting fired after the album was recorded but before it was released, and he was replaced, of course, by the legendary Steve Howe. So when the album came out, it had a picture of Steve Howe on it, but he didn't actually contribute guitars to the album. And this seemed to be a constant for Yes, this sort of tension within the band about about musical direction and what they were trying to accomplish. It seemed like virtually every album was recorded under a cloud of conflict and dissension and just band tension. So this is the first of that instance. But so we have our first band member change. We went from, I should have said this, in the first album you had Peter Banks on guitar, Tony Kaye on keyboards, John Anderson on vocals, Chris Squire on bass, and Bill Bruford on drums. So now we've replaced Peter Banks with Steve Howe for the second album. Well, like I say, after the second album was recorded. So let's get into it. As you can see, I give this an 82, which is significantly better. An 82 is an outstanding album. And this was the album that when I listened to again, I was like, wow, this is really, really good from beginning to end. There's only a couple moments that I feel like there's a hiccup. And again, my counting is off here. So let's go through the songs individually. So we open with No Opportunity Necessary, which is a Richie Havens cover, but this does not sound anything like the Richie Havens version. And this is Yes announcing who they are and what they can be. This is hyper aggressive, it's fast paced, you got this muscular sound to it, and they are just killing it from beginning to end on this. This is like proto Yes, proto peak Yes right here. You have all the signature elements of what they would come to define them. You get Chris Squire providing this big bass sound, and he's playing the bass as a lead instrument, which is something that he would do frequently. You got this symphonic arrangement, and you're building these kind of symphonic, dramatic soundscapes throughout the song. Anderson's vocals are stronger than normal. He's not employing that Chipmunks on Helium sound. He actually sounds a little better. And I mean, this song just rocks from beginning to end. You can see I give it 100. I also give 100 to the song Then. This is a very accomplished progressive piece. You got this great instrumental opening, and then you have John Anderson's signature vocals. Chris Squire's bass this album is when he establishes his bass sound that would be a signature of Yes throughout their history. It's got this complex instrumental section with all 4 instruments just killing it. They take turns playing off each other, and in many ways I feel like this kind of instrumental section is what bands like Dream Theater were going for when they were creating their kind of crazy lengthy instrumental sections on some of their songs. And then it just transitions into this really quiet ambient section, and you have Banks using a volume control on his guitar to really tasteful effects. And the final minute of the song, however, is kind of formless, and I feel like it doesn't quite make a satisfying conclusion to the first 6 minutes of the song. But still, Then is awesome. I love that song. Every Days is actually a Buffalo Springfield cover, another song that I don't know the original because I'm not a Buffalo Springfield fan, because I'm not a folk rock fan. It opens with these John Anderson vocals, and then suddenly it transitions into this very proggy, hard-edged instrumental section, which is very, very cool. Again, all the band members just killing it on their instruments. But then it just kind of unexpectedly segues back to the main song. And honestly, I don't feel like these parts fit together. I feel like the instrumental section does not fit in with the primary song, and the transitions between them are a little awkward. So I like it. It's just not as good as the other parts. Sweet Dreams is a pretty happy vocal effort from John Anderson, and something that he would employ many, many times, in my opinion, to diminishing effect. The Prophet is another proggy sounding song. It's got these orchestral arrangement, and you got the big fat Chris Squire bass sound, and you have a lengthy instrumental section that goes on for 2 minutes before the song really kicks in. Once it does kick in, I feel like it's a fairly generic kind of rock song, but the instrumental sections added up make it compelling. Clear Days is another John Anderson ballad that I just don't like. Astral Traveler is a 6-minute piece. It starts out with these very cool kind of angular guitars, and it's got a really tasteful instrumental section with very precise keyboard, guitar, bass combos that I really like. And then Time and a Word is a pretty standard pop rock song from that era. But overall, I think this is a tremendous accomplishment. Really, really great. This is not classic Yes at their peak period. They still sound more like a 60s band than a 70s prog rock band. But you can hear all the elements coming together, and they're really starting to make it work. And the songs are just great. Even the covers really work. We had 2 covers on this, the Richie Havens and the Byrds. I believe these are the last covers the band ever has on their studio albums. I could be wrong about that, but they didn't do covers very often. They had 4 covers on their first 2 albums, but they did not have many after that I am aware of. So after 2 albums, we're off to a really good start. We got a 68, which is very good, and then an 82, which is outstanding. While Time and a Word is well regarded now, it flopped when it came out. It did not sell many copies, And at that point, Atlantic Records was actually considering dropping the band from their contract, and they were convinced to give them one last chance to create something that could sell. And I'm guessing that Atlantic Records is happy they gave them that opportunity, because from this point forward, Yes would be a mega successful band. Their third album is entitled TheYesAlbum, and this is Yes flexing their muscles and becoming the massive prog rock legend that they're known for nowadays. We actually have the same 5 members. Well, I guess not. We replaced Steve Howe, replaced Peter Banks on guitar between the last album and this one. So I thought that they were the same, but they're not. This whole album from beginning to end is just a tour de force in what progressive rock music can be at this point. It's innovative, it's daring, it's bold, it's unique, it's unlike anything any band had ever done before, and Yes just pull it off in wildly successful ways. You can see that I've got two songs with 100, 2 songs with 80s, and then 2 songs with 60s. The 2 songs with 60 are really short, whereas the other ones are all pretty lengthy. So that's why the album's overall score is quite high, which I didn't even know what it is. Sorry, 90. So this is one of the very highest rated albums from the band, in my opinion. And when I went back and listened to this, I was really struck just by how consistent and good it is, other than those 2 little mishaps. The song we're listening to is Yours Disgrace, and this is a 10-minute epic, and this is as good as any 10 minutes of music that Yes has ever put together. It combines so many things that they do well. So you've got just a fantastic arrangement and transitions out the wazoo here. I mean, they go from hard and loud to quiet and soft, fast to slow, slow to fast, aggressive to relaxed. I mean, it's a masterclass in transitions and combining different sorts of sounds into a single cohesive whole that is greater than the individual parts. These tasteful guitar melodies that contrast with the kind of more aggressive keyboard sound. Man, I just like this song. I can remember this the first time I heard it, that dum 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 dum. That's just compelling right from the first second. But the journey that this song, Yours Is No Disgrace, takes the listener on is just tremendous, and I will never get sick of this song. Absolutely fantastic. Now, The Clap is a 3-minute classical acoustic guitar piece by Steve Howe. It's actually live on the album, and I'll be honest, I find Steve Howe's guitar solos, these usually acoustic guitar solos, to be good but not overwhelmingly great. I kind of like Rick Emmett of Triumph always would include a classical guitar piece on his albums, and they usually tended to be between 1 minute and 2 minutes, whereas Steve Howe's tend to be 3 to 4 minutes long. And I know that sounds like a minor difference, but I frequently think his guitar solos would have benefited by being even shorter. It's good, but it's not great. Then we get Starship Trooper. This is another 10-minute epic. It's broken up into 3 distinct sections. John Anderson wrote most of the song, but Chris Squire did write the middle section, Disillusion, which features acoustic guitar work from Steve Howe, where it's just the acoustic guitar and some vocal melodies. This has the final, 3 minutes, is a really classic slow building, slow burn outro, where they're just building layer on top of layer of sound. And of course, this would become a massive concert staple, and that final 3 minutes would often be stretched out into 5 or even longer minutes, because it just begs to let the musician, the band members, kind of go off on their instruments and show off their chops. Another song that has, like, it's been a staple. I think they've closed a show with this song, and it's been a staple of their concerts to this day, I believe. I've Seen All Good People, I think, was a successful single. This is a two-part song. You have the opening, which is mostly acoustic guitar and vocal harmonies, and this is a good example of the band using band-wide vocal harmonies, things that most progressive rock bands really aren't that good at. Then we get its sudden transition in this kind of funky full band instrumental section, and then they're singing the chorus over and over again on top of it. It's really kind of fun, and this again is a song that has been played in concerts almost throughout the band's history. A Venture is a John Anderson breezy, light piece that I'm not as big a fan as the rest. And then we get Perpetual Change, which is another 9-minute song. Again, another tour de force that features the band doing their, all these different soundscapes, the transitions, the vocal harmonies, the instrumental virtuoso stuff. Musically, this is a 5-star song for me. I just don't feel like the lyrical parts are as strong as the instrumental parts. My notes say it has an odd sudden transition that isn't as successful as those on Yours Is No Disgrace and Starship Trooper. I don't remember that in Perpetual Change, but I do like the very beginning of that song with the keyboard opening. It's really cool. The 4 songs that stand out, Yours Is No Disgrace, Starship, Seen All Good People, and Perpetual Change, man. I mean, that makes up, 35 minutes of this album, and it's really awesome. The other 2 songs only make up about 6 minutes of music. So, the Yes album is a no questions asked classic progressive rock album, and it propelled Yes into it was very successful from album sales perspective. Yeah, I've Seen All Good People became a single, but this was an album selling effort. And from this point forward, Yes were basically superstars, and their next album is going to propel them into even bigger heights. But you can see that now we're off to a good start with each album getting progressively better than the one before. I should note that the Yes album came out in 1971, which was a significant year for progressive rock. There were so many albums that came out that year that are considered classics. So we have the Yes album from Yes, you have Nursery Crime by Genesis, Aqualung by Jethro Tull, Tarkus from Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Islands by King Crimson, Metal from Pink Floyd, Pawn Hearts by Vandergraaf Generator, and Acquiring the Taste by Gentle Giant. All those albums came out in 1971. In addition, the next Yes album came out in 1971, which is Fragile. So it was released only 9 months after the Yes album. And if we look here, that's now their 4th album in less than a 2-year, maybe 3-year period, 1969 to 1971. So this was common back in the 60s and 70s for bands to release an album every year, and sometimes even release 2 albums in a year. I know Rush did it, Led Zeppelin did it. Not unusual. Very fertile period of creative music being made in the prog rock genre during this time. Now, we have recorded Under Tension. Like I said, the band wanted keyboard player Tony Kaye to start using a wider variety of keyboard sounds. Specifically, they wanted him to embrace the mellotron, which was becoming in vogue among the prog rock music scene. And he resisted that. He really didn't want to do it. And eventually that led to him getting fired and replaced by Rick Wakeman, who not only brought virtuosic capabilities, but he liked exploring all the different keyboard sounds. He had a wide array of synthesizers that would be on stage with him. And so now with both Steve Howe and Rick Wakeman on board, we get the really classic, one of the two most classic instances of Yes, which is John Anderson, Steve Howe, Chris Squire, Rick Wakeman, and in this case, Bill Bruford on drums. And the combination of those four with either Bill Bruford on drums or Alan White on drums is, in my opinion, the best, most epic, classic Yes lineup. And any effort that involves those six guys combined is always high quality. Now, this album is kind of a weird album. You can see that I've got a lot of songs that are rated low, but we can segment this album into two. We have 4 songs that are full band efforts, and as you can see, I give each one of them a 100 rating. So all 4 full band efforts are great songs. Outside of that, we get 5 songs that are individual efforts, and these are frequently short and, in my opinion, ill-advised. I don't know why the band decided to do these. We're going to have half solo, half things. So looking at these solo efforts, 5% for Nothing is I don't know why I started with that. Cons and Brahms, sorry, is Rick Wakeman, and he's using different instruments, electric piano, grand piano, organ, harpsichord, and synthesizer to play various parts of this classical music piece. And that sounds like a great idea in theory, but I just don't like the way that it works very well. I guess I gave it a 3 stars, so it doesn't bother me. We Have Heaven is John Anderson's, and this is 100 seconds of just dreadful, really annoying things. And when I rate something as a 20, you can see I will do everything in my power to turn it off. In fact, they tacked on a bit of this at the end of Heart of the Sunrise, which we listened to earlier, and I hate that song. It's just annoying. It sounds terrible to me. Then we get 5% for 5% for Nothing, which is a sort of jazzy atonal thing by Bill Bruford. If it were more than 40 seconds, I'd probably rate it lower, but it's okay. Mood for a Day is another classical acoustic guitar piece from Steve Howe. Good, but actually I like this one quite a lot. I think as a composition it's one of Steve Howe's better ones. And then we get The Fish, which is a real musical piece by Chris Squire, and then John Anderson laying these vocals over it. And it took me a while to figure out that what he's singing is the name of the song, Shanlandiria Prematuros. He sings that over the bass. Anyway, those instrumental pieces, those individual pieces are just kind of here and there. But the 4 songs that are real full band efforts here, they don't miss on any one of these. Roundabout, of course, is the song that launched them into superstardom. The record company put out an edited version of it because it's an 8-minute song, but I think they put out like a 3.5 or 4-minute version of it without the band's knowledge, and it became a radio hit. Now, here's the interesting thing: is I grew up in the 70s. I've never heard that 4-minute version of Roundabout. I only read about it in research for this. Whenever I heard the song on the radio, it was the full 8-minute version. And this song is a tour de force. I know that today it's kind of been overplayed, and so it's become kind of rote and people are familiar with it. But man, if you watch like react videos of young people hearing Roundabout for the first time, they are just overwhelmed because there's nobody that had done anything like this. You've got the delicate acoustic guitar, classical guitar opening. Then you've got that lead bass line by Chris Squire that is just infectious and super impressive. You've got these great infectious vocal melodies. The band takes you on a journey. They're transitioning from quiet to loud. I mean, this is everything that you want in classic Yes, all wrapped up in a pop song that keeps you shaking your ass and singing along to the lyrics. This is just no holds barred, perfect progressive rock classic. South Side of the Sky, same thing. Now this is different. It's got a pretty simple arrangement. It's got an opening, a middle section that is little more than a piano solo by Rick Wakeman, and then we go back to the main section, so it's just got 3 sections, but it all works wonderfully. The vocal harmonies My wife and I used to play Rock Band, and this song is available on Rock Band, and she would always sing the vocals, and she got annoyed with the vocal harmonies on this because they can be kind of repetitive. But when you're listening to them, the layers of vocal harmonies really work really cool. Then we have Long Distance Runaround, which is another radio staple. This is a shorter song, but it's very poppy and very accessible. It's a vehicle for John Anderson somewhat. And then finally we get Heart of the Sunrise, and this is 11 minutes, and this is unrestrained, no holds barred musical aggression. I love how fierce and aggressive this song is. And this is a full-blown instrumental workout, but you've heard me say that, let's see, Heart of the Sunrise is 11 minutes, South Side of the Sky is like 9, Roundabout is 8. We had 3 9+ minute songs on the previous album. None of these songs are too long. These songs needed to be 9 and 10 minutes long because the musical ideas on them were so strong and so compelling that they just naturally, organically needed to be 10 minutes long. That is rare because I've seen so many bands who felt like, and that's what I think Yes was different. When they had long songs, they were because the songs needed to be long. They did not, at least during this era, set out to make long songs. They just happened to be long. I feel like bands like Metallica, Iron Maiden, Dream Theater, that they frequently wanted to make long songs, and the objective was a long song as opposed to a music idea that warranted a long song. This is a fabulous album. And then what did I say? I give it a 86, so almost as good as the Yes album. Considering the dreck of all those individual instrumental pieces, the fact that those other 4 songs are so good is really, really compelling. The album as a whole is flawed because it's got, if you listen to the album from beginning to end, you have to put up with those songs. Just get rid of a few of them and listen to the rest of it. You'll enjoy it more. That's a good example right there of combining vocal harmonies and the kind of jamming instrumental virtuoso stuff. Really good example right there. Only 10 months later, and with the same lineup, we have the same 5 guys that made Fragile would make the band's next album, which would truly launch them into superstardom, and the album is Close to the Edge. It's hard to talk about this album because it's already been talked about so much. This album would reach number 3 in the US and 4 in the UK, and if you go to the Progressive Archives website, which is a website that I think is the best music site on the web, and a website that I reference often, it is the highest rated album on the entire site. And this album is widely regarded as a progressive rock classic and frequently shows up as the #1 album on various lists of this, that, and the other. As you can see, I give it 100. It only has 3 songs, but in my opinion, all 3 songs are absolutely brilliant. Now, I'd say that the album had the same 5 members as the previous album, which gives the appearance of a happy quintet of people, but the album was actually named Close to the Edge. It was named by Bill Bruford, who was the drummer at the time, because he felt the band was on the edge, and that they were close to the edge of splintering apart, which shows that even when they were doing these great, peakier albums, there was still tension in the band. The band was the album was kind of recorded live in the studio. The producer wanted to create this soundscape that of the band all playing together at once. This is not. This is Relayer. So the first song, side 1, consisted of Close to the Edge, which is a 20-minute epic. Became a hugely popular song, even though it's 20 minutes long, and the band frequently would play this live in concert all the way throughout their whole career. And then you have two 10-minute songs in You and I and Siberian Khatru that made up side 2. It's hard to talk about Close to the Edge because, like I say, everything's been said that can be said about it, but I will go through my notes. This is pretty much a Steve Howe, John Anderson song. It's really a combination of different songs, like the I Get Up, I Get Down section was a song that Howe had written previously that he brought here. The beginning opens with these kind of nature sounds and then suddenly kicks in and the whole band is just going crazy. And the idea here was that each band member was told to improvise at the same time, so they're each playing their own thing, and so it is kind of an assault on the senses to begin with, but then it all resolves itself at the exact right moment into, you know, when the song kind of kicks off. But that intro, I can remember I had heard about this song and I knew that it was supposed to be this big prog rock epic. So when I heard it, I was just like, whoa, what's going on? Is it all this jazzy improv, almost atonal stuff at the very beginning that can be a little bit overwhelming? There's 4 distinct sections to the song. Like I say, open that very beginning. It's got this great sublime arrangement with it that allows the band to explore these huge swaths of different sounds. I'll say the lyrics are John Anderson's typically kind of happy sounding vague metaphors. I love the transitions from the primary song into that quiet I get up, I get down kind of piano driven section, and then when it builds and you have the crescendo when the band finally kicks in after that quiet section. And it's cool because it doesn't do it once, it does it twice. You have the quiet section and then they build and get going and then they stop and go back to the quiet and then they go in and then they still start jamming out. And man, all those transitions from all those things work brilliantly. It's just a spectacular song from beginning to end. And You and I, another 10-minute epic, and this again has become an album section. I mean, a concert staple. It's got 4 distinct sections: the Quarter Life, Eclipse, Preacher Teacher, and the Apocalypse. The intro is really interesting. It sounds like Steve Howe just kind of warming up on his guitar. He's got these cool harmonics that he employs. Quarter Life is got this acoustic guitar and light synthesizer, and then we transition to this slow symphonic sounding section called Eclipse, and then we go back to the Steve Howe acoustic guitar opening, and then it kind of has this folksy up-tempo acoustic guitar section, and then finally we close with a big build-up. Siberian Khatru, this is a hard rock song. It's a hard rock workout. Much more muscular riffs and electric guitars. Both Steve Howe's guitar and Bill Bruford's drums throughout this song are just jaw-dropping. I mean, just really well. Rick Wakeman employs a harpsichord during one point, which represents kind of like I said earlier. He was willing to play any kind of, if it had keys, he'd play it. And his ability to use all those different sounds would become kind of a signature from whenever he was playing with the band. Wow. And You and I is the song that has been played at seemingly every concert they've done. I'm sure they haven't been in every, but many of their concerts have it. I actually like Siberian Khatru a little better, but I always like the more aggressive, harder stuff. The only thing I don't like is Siberian Khatru ends with a fade out, and I always prefer songs to have a real organic ending as opposed to a fade out. But this album just cemented Yes as a successful artist in 1972. From this point forward, they were rock music superstars, flying on private jets, selling out arenas, living the big lavish rock star lifestyle. It was a huge album at the time. Its reputation has withstood the test of time, and like I say, it's regarded as the very best album on Progressive Archives. So Close to the Edge, album classic. Now, between 1972's Close to the Edge and 1973's Tales from Topographic Oceans, we had two things occur. One is Bill Bruford left the band. Remember, I was the one who said that he named the album Close to the Edge because he thought the band was teetering on the brink. And it's interesting, but he didn't think the band was adventurous or bold enough, and he wanted to try more experimental music, so he left to go do that, but also because the tension within the band. So Bill Bruford was out, and Alan White was brought in, and he had like only, I think, 3 days to learn the band's catalog because they were touring at the time, and he needed to be on stage and playing the song. The band, so that's one of the things happened. Bill Bruford left, Alan White's in. And then the second thing is the band released Yes Songs, a triple LP live album that was hugely successful on its own. It's one of the best live albums from the 70s, which is the decade of live albums. Nevertheless, only a year later, they came out with Tales from Topographic Oceans, which is a double-length LP, meaning 4 sides of vinyl, which is about 80 minutes worth, but there were only 4 songs. Each song was an album, each song was a 20-minute side-long epic, okay? And you can see that I give each one a different score. We have a 60, and we have an 80, a 60, a 40, and a 100. Now, this is Tales from Topographic Ocean is often cited as the example of progressive rock excess and why progressive rock fell out of favor and punk rock started to become ascendant. Is 20-minute songs. The album is based on the let me get my notes here. The 4 bodies of Hindu knowledge. Each song is supposed to represent one of these bodies of Hindu knowledge, and considering that John Anderson's lyrics often don't really have significant concrete meaning, the lyrics are oftentimes pretty vague and somewhat meaningless in my opinion, and I can get why people call this an album of excess. Now, a little while ago I talked about how all their long songs were long because they needed to be long. Not true here. They basically had about an album and a half of good music, and then they padded it out to make it 2 albums long. And Rick Wakeman has said that a lot of this album was filler, and I agree with him. In fact, this album is really a Steve Howe, John Anderson album. Rick Wakeman was not that involved in the creative process, and his keyboards are not as prominent as they are on later albums, and he would end up leading the band after this album. I don't think I've ever gotten through a single listen to this album from beginning to end. It's 85 minutes, I think, in total length, and I just can't do it. Specifically, those 2 middle songs, I get bored and want to hear something more substantive. The Revealing Science of God is a really good song that has some filler, in my opinion. I think if they had made a 12 or 15-minute song that had the best parts, this would probably be a 5-star song. The opening in particular is really, really cool. In fact, you have there's a lot of lyrics to this song, but 2/3 of them occur in the first 3 minutes when you have this slow build opening. It then resolves itself in a satisfactory, but not super satisfactory way, where it transitions from the opening into the main part of the song. And you can hear what the band's trying to do here, and it works. It just doesn't work as well as it has on those great epics we heard from the previous albums. The Remembering, I just feel like it's generic and underdone. Like, there's just not a lot here to grab onto. There's a quote from the Prague Archive site from one of the reviewers that says, "It's only natural that many fans and even certain band members will begin to fall off at this point and thus never behold Yes in their true splendor." Yeah, I could not disagree more with that. But the point is that you can hear the reviewer. He's like, well, people don't like this, but they just don't understand. This is the real Yes and the true splendor. Nah, it's not. In my opinion, it's overindulgent claptrap. All right. There is a cool jam there at one point, and that's the thing is, all of these songs have parts where they're really good, but there's just too much. There's too many periods where it's not. You know, you got a 20-minute song, there might be 5 minutes that is really dull and uninteresting, and it makes the 20-minute experience kind of, you know, a challenge. The Ancient is very jazzy opening that goes on too long. It reminds me of kind of the opening to Close to the Edge with this jazzy kind of atonal stuff. I just don't think it works nearly as well. It goes on for too long. It has this dramatic stop and start section that in my opinion does not work. It doesn't have any resolution to it. We get a lot of dissonant nonsense that I don't like. And at one point you have John Anderson's chanting vocals that in my opinion are embarrassing. So I really don't like The Ancient. Now Ritual is a great piece. I wouldn't put it up there with Close to the Edge, but it's pretty close. It does have this one part about 14 minutes in where we go to a pure percussion sound where you not only have an Alan White drum solo, but everybody in the band is beating on things. And I think that's pretty cool, and it works really well, especially in concert. And the vocal melodies of the main vocal melodies of the name of the song, Nous sommes du soleil, that's really good. That's memorable. That's got that sort of combination of prog rock instrumentation with these compelling, infectious vocal melodies. But overall, Tales for Topographic Oceans was very divisive. You had a lot of people tuning out at this point saying, man, can y'all play a 5-minute song? Because four sides of 20-minute epics is a little bit overwhelming for anyone. And like I say, Tales for Topographic Oceans is frequently cited as the poster child for prog rock excess, and I can understand why people have that reaction. As you can see, I give it a much lower score than what we've had, 71, so the lowest score since their debut album, and far below, certainly Close to the Edge, and even the 3 albums before that. So from my point, a pretty substantial step back, and in many ways it's kind of Yes getting full of themselves, thinking that, you know, we got to have these grand epics, and getting away from being able to write just basic rock songs. While Tales of Topographic Oceans was divisive among many, and a lot of critics thought it was overindulgent, it was commercially successful. Yes seemed to be able to sell 1 million records no matter what. However, band members were not all excited about it. Rick Wakeman didn't like the direction of the album. He did not particularly enjoy playing it live. And I think it was on this tour when he notoriously ordered a curry to be delivered while he was on stage. A roadie brought him his takeout order, and he ate it on stage while other members were doing some of their parts, which was somewhat embarrassing for the band. So he left after Tales from Topographic Oceans, and he was replaced by Patrick Moraz, who had been in a band called Refugee and would eventually become a part of the Moody Blues. And he brought a really interesting element to the band that I thought really helped the next album, which was Relayer, which came out in 1974. And as you can see, this is a return to form for the band. In many ways, I think Relayer is unique and special in the band's catalog. It doesn't sound like any of their albums, and it's primarily because of Patrick Moraz, because he brings a jazz and funk element that you generally don't have from their keyboard player. As we can see, it's again only 3 songs. The Gates Delirium, side 1, 25-minute song. Side 2 consists of 2 10-minute songs, Sound Chaser and To Be Over. So On the last 3 albums, which can cover 4 discs, you had Close to the Edge, then you had Tales from Topographic Oceans, which is 2 discs, and then you have Relayer, that's 4 discs. They only have 10 songs on these four discs. And the record company found it increasingly difficult to market a band that only had 10 and 20-minute songs. But I love 2 of these songs, Gates of Delirium and Sound Chaser. Gates of Delirium in particular might be my... I don't think it is. I don't think might. It is my absolute favorite Yes song in the entire catalog. Part of it is the Patrick Moraz effect. Like I say, he brings these jazzy piano runs, and he's got these funky vibes that he brings that is unlike anything else they've had. Additionally, we have lyrics that aren't hippy-dippy, love is the answer to everything. In fact, John Anderson is singing about war in this case, and it has these lyrics. He says, "Listen, your friends have been broken. They tell us of your poison. Now we know. Kill them. Give them as they give us. Slay them. Burn their children's laughter onto hell." Those are about as dark lyrics as John Anderson's ever come close to. And I feel it gives this song a heft and weight that is largely missing from vast majority of Yes music, where the lyrics are mostly these hippy-dippy, let's all feel good and love each other stuff. That's fine, but a steady diet of it becomes a little overdone. That, and then those lyrics are combined with an instrumental section that is supposed to depict war, and it is pulled off brilliantly. The battle section, or the war section of Gates of Delirium, is just spectacular. In fact, the entire arrangement is just sublime, fluidly takes the listener on this journey with emotionally. So, like, it starts where you're emotionally preparing for war and recognizing that it's going to be costly. Then you have the actual battle. And then finally the soon section at the end, which is this kind of soothing peace after the war. And I love the battle section. It follows like a real battle. You start out with like one side having this determined purpose that we're going to go and we're going to make this happen. And then it's met by opposing forces, and you get this sort of chaos. And it sounds like a battle. I mean, it's really, really well done. And then finally, you get the one side that started like making a final push, and the opposing elements slowly speak, like the elements of the opposition in the song are slowly snuffed out one by one, and then you get this slow fade that has Steve Howe's just beautiful pedal steel guitar solo where he uses a volume pedal, and I mean, it is emotional. It is beautiful. It's an example of Steve Howe being unique and great and awesome. And I should have mentioned this about the song Yours Is No Disgrace. He has a guitar solo in that song that is also unique and brilliant and unlike anything that I know any other guitarist doing. Steve Howe has lots of moments, but those two, the quiet kind of beautiful guitar solo here, and then that very aggressive guitar solo in Yours Is Disgrace. These are 2 of his very best moments. I cannot say, and then of course you have the Soon section, which features John Anderson's more positive lyrics, which in contrast to the war and battle work much better than if he was just singing about happy love is the answer to everything the whole 20 minutes. And that Soon section starts with Steve Howe's guitar, then you add the vocals, and then the band just slowly introduces sound after sound after sound until it builds and builds and builds and then reaches a crescendo and ends. And I mean, that Soon section as the closure to what came before, the whole thing is just spectacular and works brilliant. I love Gates of Delirium, maybe, like I said, my favorite Yes piece. Sound Chaser might be my second favorite. I love the beginning, which is pure jazz. It's just drums and piano. And the piano was actually Patrick Moraz on the spot being asked to improvise an opening for this thing, and what's on the album is largely what he did when he was auditioning for the band, and that astounds me because I love his piano at the beginning of Sound Chaser, and you combine that with this drum, it's this very jazzy opening. I'm not a big fan. That's not that I'm not a big fan. That when Anderson kicks in with his lyrics, I feel it's not up to the same quality as the whole rest of the song, but his lyrics don't last for long. In the middle, we get another Steve Howe tour de force. This time he's on the electric guitar, and it's just him with some little background from the keyboards. This is a good example of Steve Howe showing how you can make really super impressive, technically challenging guitar solos that don't have to be a zillion notes per minute, a la Eddie Van Halen or John Petrucci or most of the modern prog metal guys. It's not that he's playing fast. There are times when he plays fast, but he also plays slow, and it goes quiet and loud. And I mean, this is just Steve Howe just killing it on guitar again. And then after his guitar solo, which also has these drums that bring this drama to it that I think works beautiful, and then it segues back to the opening, and we get an abbreviated section of the drum piano jazz intro, and then you get this just freak out for the final 2 or 3 minutes. The whole thing is awesome. It works beautifully. I love Sound Chaser. To Be Over, many people consider to be of the same quality as Sound Chaser and Gates of Delirium. I just don't share that same enthusiasm. It's a very quiet song, and it's supposed to, capture like I say, somebody lazily going down the river on a lazy Sunday afternoon. I keep thinking the song's going to go somewhere and do something, and it never does. And it goes on for 10 minutes. And there are a lot of people that love this song. I'm just not one of them. And that's what prevents this album from being as a perfect album like Close to the Edge. But you can see it's a 91, which is a true classic. Especially Sound Chaser and Gates of Delirium, I cannot say enough good things about. I love, love, love those two songs. Following the Relayer tour, which at this point, Yes is touring North America, Europe. Not sure they really spent a lot of time in Asia or South America. But they were a big touring band. So as you see, they've released 7 albums in a 5-year period, and then toured incessantly in between them. So they have not had time off. So after the Relayer tour, they did take some time off. And I believe every member of the band released a solo album during that period. And when they got together to start rehearsing for their next album, the rest of the band felt that Patrick Moraz's was not fully invested in what they were trying to accomplish. And so he ended up getting fired. And Rick Wakeman was brought back. So yet again, you can see we keep combining this tension and difficulties between band members, and so it would be a full 3 years later. So after 7 albums in 5 years, is it 7, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 albums in 5 years? It was 3 full years later before Going for the One had come out, and by now the music landscape had changed. Prog rock was totally not in vogue anymore, and punk rock and disco had become ascendant. And the band adapted a little bit. They shortened the songs on this album. You see we get 5 songs. We still had Awaken, which is a 15-minute piece, but the other songs are all between like 5 and 8 minutes, so a little more digestible. You can also see we got rid of the Roger Dean covers and have this cover instead, for better or worse. Now, this album was a commercial success. It hit number 1 in the UK and number 8 in the US. I can say that it was at this point in my going through the full catalog that I started to wear tired of John Anderson's vocals. And I think it's because unlike the previous album, the songs here are just not as strong. The songwriting isn't as strong. So if you've got a mediocre song, if you add a really great vocalist, it can propel that mediocre song into something that's more compelling. If you don't, like I feel Yes doesn't with John Anderson, then the mediocre song just stays a mediocre song, and I feel like that's what we get a lot of here. So my notes on the songs like Going for the One and Turn of the Century, they both sound generic and uninspired to me. Turn of the Century is nearly 8 minutes, and they can stretch out and do some instrumental sections, but it's modest compared to what we've heard in the past, and nothing all that super compelling to me. Sorry. What did I do? There we go. Parallels, we get an actual church organ that starts, and it's funny, I read this. There was a church like a few miles from where they were recording it, and they actually went to the church, and rather than take all the recording equipment there, they just used a phone line to record the organ from inside the church to the recording studio. I'm surprised that worked. It does have a cool jam at the end. I give it 4 stars, but honestly, it's not much better than a 3. It's more like a 3.5 song. Wondrous Stories is actually not the last song. It's the 4th. This is a John Anderson light and airy hippy-dippy piece. There was a time when I really liked this song, but that was before I had heard the 75 other John Anderson airy hippy-dippy ballads. I give it a 60. It's a good enough song. And then Awaken is the 15-minute piece, and it opens with, very typical dainty Anderson lyrics against an ambient background. I find the lyric melodies throughout this song a bit awkward. At the 6-minute mark, we do transition to a very keyboard-oriented instrumental section with more piano recorded in the church. And then at about the 10-minute mark, we return to Anderson's lyrics, and that's where I kind of lose interest again. But it does have an instrumental crescendo to end with. But this is, you can, like many bands that have been popular in the early 70s, as the mid-70s segued into the late 70s, and like I say, disco and punk became ascendant and what the media especially focused on. A lot of bands from those early 70s or late 60s really struggled to adapt their sound and transition to a new musical landscape. And this is clearly Yes trying to do it. Like I say, it's 3 years later. They changed the look of the album cover. They stopped doing the sidelong epics. They're trying to adjust to a new sound, and it just didn't work all that well, in my opinion. So Going for the One was commercially a successful album. I believe it sold over 1 million copies in the US. Critically was not as well received, and that's, you can see my score is consistent with that opinion. And just a year later, the band with the same lineup would come out with Tormato, which is basically the same type score. Now this album has one of the most ill-advised covers I can ever imagine. The story is that Hypnosis, the group known for creating numerous classic rock album covers, brought the proposal to the band, and Rick Wakeman disliked it so much that he threw a tomato at it. That's his claim. That's disputed. There's lots of different stories about how the tomato got thrown at the proposed artwork. But in the end, they decided to use the artwork with the tomato on it, hence the name Tormato. And frankly, the cover artwork deserved to have a tomato thrown at it. That guy standing there in his suit looks dumb, and then adding the tomato onto it is just, I don't know what they were doing. And honestly, this album is a bit of a mess, in my opinion. While the band was consistent members from the previous album, it's that classic John Anderson, Steve Howe, Chris Squire, Rick Wakeman, Alan White. The songs here are just not very strong. You can see I only have 3 that are above a 60. Future Times Rejoice is like about a 7-minute song. It's the second longest song on the album, and it's just a pretty standard rocker. the songs that work here on this album work just because they're better songs. The songs that have lower scores are just they're not as well written songs. Don't Kill the Whale, clearly designed to be a radio friendly song, and of course it's got some activism lyrics about saving whales. 4 minutes. It's okay. It's not great. Release is about a 6-minute rocker. It does have a weird section in the middle where suddenly you hear audience cheers and then it segues into a drum solo. This was things that bands in the 70s did pretty regularly. Aerosmith did it with Seasons of Wither. Kansas did it with How My Soul Cries Out on Monolith, and Styx did it on Fanfare for a Common Man, the very first song on their first album. It's just weird things that bands would do back then in the 70s. It was common. So this was 1977, and so it's only a year after Boston released their debut album with that apex production with all those massively layered guitar and vocal harmonies and that big wall of sound. And frankly, the whole rock world was going towards that. You had bands like Styx and Kansas and many others that were doing these really greatly produced albums. And Tormato just doesn't sound like that. It's not a very good sounding album, frankly. The one really good song is On the Silent Wings of Freedom. It's got this cool bass drum intro, and it's just one of the more rockin' songs on here and more solid. Arriving UFO is kind of the same attempt, it's just not as good. Circus of Heaven is another John Anderson ballad. It has a spoken word section featuring John Anderson's son, and that goes about as well as you could think. Onward is a Chris Squire song, and it just goes nowhere in my opinion. It's boring. Just overall, I feel this is a band that has kind of run out of ideas. You can kind of hear that, and they're struggling to adjust to a changing musical world, you know, where the days of the 20-minute epics are over, and frankly, progressive rock is kind of out of fashion at this point, and bands like Yes and Pink Floyd are seen as dinosaurs and considered to be past their prime. And this album kind of sounds like that. It sounds like a band struggling and certainly not at the peak of their powers. Following the relatively lukewarm reception to Tormato, the band would gather in 1980 to make the album Drama. However, there was clear fractures in the band forming at this point. Rick Wakeman and John Anderson wanted to continue making more light-sounding songs that featured Anderson's light, airy vocals and delicate piano work, whereas Steve Howe, Alan White, and Chris Squire wanted to be more muscular and play a more rock-oriented effort, and they weren't getting along in the studio. Then Alan White broke his foot roller skating, very 70s event, and then when they got back together, it wasn't working, and at this point, both John Anderson and Rick Wakeman left the band. So now you only have Alan White, Chris Squire, and Steve Howe. Now, the band's manager, Brian Lane, I believe, I can't tell. He was also managing the band The Buggles, and The Buggles consisted of only 2 people, which was Trevor Horn on vocals and Jeffrey Down on keyboards. And so Brian Lane went to those 2 guys and said, hey, why don't you contribute some ideas to this Yes thing? And those 2 guys entered thinking that they were being asked to make additional contributions to the next album. However, they were asked to keep making more and more contributions and the things went on for so long that eventually they asked, hey, when is John Anderson coming back? And that's when it was revealed that they had left and that they were actually being offered spots in the band. And they said, okay. Trevor Horn was not excited about this. He was not a natural. He was more of a producer than a singer. His vocals sound pretty similar to John Anderson's, But he didn't have that natural frontman persona that John Anderson was very good at. He wasn't confident. Of course, he wasn't eager to replace a legend in a legendary band. Nevertheless, the band went ahead with the recording, and frankly, I think Drama is a really underrated album in the band's catalog. And if you want to make a straight line from the classic Yes to the pop-oriented 90125 Yes, you can start right here with Drama, and then Jeffrey Downes and Steve Howe then moved on to Asia, where they take that prog pop sound and kind of crafted it into a big hit at that time. And then from that to 90125, you can connect the dots and see the natural progression from there. And if you think about that, the gulf between, say, Relayer and 90125 doesn't seem so great when you think about this. Let's look at the individual songs. There's only 6 of them. But 4, as you can see, I've got 200s, 280s, and 260s. Machine Messiah is what we just listened to. And this is a 10-minute brilliant piece, and it's as hard-edged as any Yes song ever. I mean, it's downright virtually heavy metal. I love this song, and you can see why Alan White, Chris Squire, and Steve Howe were more wanting to go in this direction and not more John Anderson ballad stuff. Yeah, I mean, this, in my notes I say this intro qualifies for heavy metal in 1980, and it is. It's quintessential Yes masterpiece with virtuosic musicianship, multiple time changes, harmonic vocals, sweeping theatrical arrangement, everything that's good. White Car is just an 80-second piece. I don't honestly remember what it consists of. Does it really happen? Now, this is very 80s pop sounding. By the way, the production on this, Trevor Horn did the production as well. Brilliant. He was a brilliant producer, and this is a modern sounding album, unlike Tormato. The Does It Happen is not the most compelling song, in my opinion. The last 90 seconds, you do get this great outro. Into the Lens is a really good song. It's about 8 minutes long. It's got this very cool instrumental proggy intro. The whole song, in fact, is all proggy. It's got this crazy arrangement, and the rhythm changes, and you got these dramatic intervals. Has a really cool groove throughout, and it's catchy prog, which is what I would say this Drama Asia 90125 kind of thing is catchy prog. This is a good masterclass in mid-tempo, highly creative drumming by Alan White. The one thing I will say is Jeffrey Downes' guitar solo is relatively uninspired, and he's not Rick Wakeman, and it comes through. Run Through the Light, this is a simpler arrangement, general vibe. It still rocks. And then finally we get the closer, Tempest Fugit, which is about 6 minutes. It's got this great intro with Alan White and Chris Squire just killing it as a rhythm section. And this is prog pop, okay? This is like 6 minutes, commercially sounding, infectious. This was the single that was, the biggest hit from what was not a big hit. The album Drama was not a big hit. And, but it's a very great, Tempest Fugit rocks as far as I'm concerned. So, this is essentially it for the 70s version of prog, because Drama, I saw Yes on the Drama tour, and this is one show I wish I could go back with the knowledge I have now, because I just didn't know the music very well as a 13 or 14-year-old kid, whatever I was. I would like to go back and see that show with more musical knowledge like I have now, because at the time it felt like a band on their last legs, and that's what Yes during Drama. They'd lost John Anderson, they'd lost Rick Wakeman. This album was a pretty significant departure in sound. It was not commercially successful. When I saw them in concert, it was at a 20,000-seat arena, but it was not full. And it just felt like replacement Yes, like we weren't getting the real thing. That's what it felt like. So, in many ways, after this ended, the band kind of disintegrated, and it seemed like that would be the end of Yes, but we could not have been more wrong. And if you want to know more about that story, join me on my next release when we'll look at the second part of the Yes catalog. I appreciate you guys spending time with me. Thanks. I'm out.